Do you know how much collective brain power makes up Marvel in the MCU? It's ridiculous. How do these people walk around all the time because their heads are just so full of knowledge? But who's the ultimate smartypants? Which Marvel or MCU character truly can claim the title of smartest person in the universe? It's hard to say, but we certainly got some contenders. Let's be jealous and look at all the smarties with the big brains right now.
Big man in a suit of armor. Take that off, what are you?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Notice how genius is the first thing Tony Stark says in his famous genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist line. It's because the dude is wicked smart. For the longest time, he was probably seen as the smartest man in the MCU, and he still might be. I mean, there's almost literally nothing his mind can't do. He perfected time travel basically while washing dishes, he became an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics overnight, and he can keep creating suit after suit after suit like clockwork. He's the very definition of a true genius. But how do we really grade one's intelligence? Because sure, he invents a shiny object after a shiny object and is brilliant on a technical level, and yet he keeps making really questionable decisions. He made Ultron, he gave complete control of his weapons satellite to a hormonal teenager, and he became too emotional that one time and started fighting Captain America and Bucky. All I'm saying is that Tony's either the smartest dumb person or the dumbest smart person, and I can't tell which one. Man, I miss that guy. Wakanda blew us all away with its highly advanced society that was unlike anything we've seen on Earth before. Who knew this was right under our noses the whole time? Throughout the years, Wakanda had always been an advanced society thanks to its early discovery of vibranium. But really, I think it's safe to say the main reason Wakanda is so successful right now is because of Shuri, T'Challa's little sister. Although she's only a teen, she's probably the smartest person on Earth. The Russo brothers even confirmed as much when they said Shuri was smarter than Tony Stark. And given what she's invented, I'm inclined to agree with them. This really showed in her scene with Bruce Banner when discussing the ways to remove the Mind Stone from Vision's head, and she openly wondered why Bruce and Tony didn't design it a certain way, to which Bruce had to humbly respond because they didn't think of that. It's incredibly exciting to think what's next for Shuri in the MCU. After the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman and the announcement that they would not be recasting the character, all eyes are on Black Panther 2 to see how characters like Shuri adjust to this new life after T'Challa's passing. Only time will tell, but I think Shuri is capable of just about anything. I think the genius of Bruce Banner often gets a little overshadowed in the MCU. He's more known as the guy who can't get too angry or else he'll turn into a big rage monster, and I think audiences prefer to watch the Hulk smash rather than Banner doing science stuff, which is a real shame. Bruce Banner is an incredible scientist, but because he's often working on things with Tony Stark, he tends to get overshadowed. Like the time travel thing, for instance.
Time travel! What?
Tony technically came up with the right theory to fix everything, but Bruce was still hard at work, turning Ant-Man young and old over and over again. And he did have a huge hand in inventing Ultron, but Tony usually takes the brunt of the blame for that. Is it too much to ask to see Bruce be smart on his own? Although I loved seeing him in Thor Ragnarok, there was nothing to Bruce's character that proved he was smarter than everyone else. He just seemed like a regular guy. But let's not forget that he's one smart cookie. I mean, his picture is up next to all those famous scientists at Peter's high school, so you know he's got the goods. Although the Peter Parker we've seen in the MCU may not seem as smart as the Peter Parker of the comic books, we shouldn't count this webhead out. Like, yeah, there's a lot you can say about this Peter Parker being a bit naive and unaware of his surroundings. I mean, he was tricked and manipulated by Mysterio to give him control of all that sweet, sweet Stark weaponry, and it didn't take that much effort. You see that and you don't think Peter is all that smart. But then you see something like him putting in the work to design a whole new suit for himself at the end of Far From Home, and it's no wonder why Happy saw a young Tony Stark in that instance. He's also on his school's academic decathlon team, which I'm sure is tough to get on. Like, I bet Thor wouldn't have made the cut, am I right? Again though, this Peter Parker doesn't seem as smart as the Peter in the comics, at least not yet. He's still only a teenager, and I'm sure as he matures into an adult, he'll become even smarter. We're at that point in the MCU where every day we're getting closer to a Fantastic Four casting announcement. Don't we always feel like it's right around the corner? Hey, the Avengers Tower is being sold. Reed Richards bought it. Hey, Monica Rambeau mentioned she knew an engineer. That's gotta be Reed Richards. Kang the Conqueror is in the new Ant-Man movie. That means the Fantastic Four are gonna be in that movie. We know it's on its way, and we're just so passionate because we really want to see Reed Richards and the rest of Marvel's first family done right in the MCU after 2 extremely lackluster attempts. And once they get here, boy oh boy are things gonna change. Reed Richards is one of the smartest men in the universe. And that's a little unfair. He has straight up incredible superpowers and he's super smart? Pick one, dude. Anyways, the way the MCU is going with all the multiverse and cosmic focus, we could see a situation where Reed Richards is the most important person in the MCU, with his knowledge and expertise. I sure hope so. I don't think Hank Pym gets enough credit for being smart.
Dr. Pym?
Yes, I'm still alive.
He mostly has to stand around and be the straight man to Paul Rudd's goofy Scott Lang, but look at all that he's done in his life. His Pym particles and the subsequent Ant-Man technology is probably the single greatest invention in the MCU. I mean, if he wanted to, he could solve world hunger in an instant. The ability to shrink and grow things is truly incredible, and only a genius could pull that off. The problem with Hank Pym is that he's so grouchy all the time, and that's understandable. He's always hated the Starks and S.H.I.E.L.D. and public interaction. And then when his wife vanished into the quantum realm, he really doubled down on his Grinch-like behavior. He's a very prideful and stubborn man. When he's right, and he wants everyone to know it. It's going to be fascinating to see what type of mindset Hank is in now that Janet is back. Will he be nicer? And if he's nicer and happier, will that dull his sharp scientific mind? Or make him even smarter?
Dr. Hank Pym.
Ironheart hasn't been introduced in the MCU yet, but she's certainly on the way. She's getting her own Disney Plus show, and given the track record of the Disney Plus MCU shows so far, I can't wait to see what's in store for the character. Riri Williams is another one of those smarty-pants teenagers. Like, she's way too smart for her own good. When I was a teenager, I had trouble working the stereo and the television at the same time, and still had trouble with my multiplication tables. Riri Williams built her own functioning Iron Man suit herself. And yes, it wasn't perfect right off the bat, but look at the knowledge that takes. She, of course, soon started training under Iron Man himself, and having those two smarties together just seems like too much brain power for any given situation. I hope Riri Williams makes a big impact in the MCU, and her Ironheart character really takes center stage for things like a possible Young Avengers. Wouldn't that be awesome? I already think Professor X is an extremely smart individual by himself, but if you add in his special mutant abilities, I think that makes him seem even smarter. Like, being a telepath just makes you appear like you have all the answers. You often perceive telepaths as intelligent, as opposed to, say, something like having a rapid healing ability or flight. And sure, Charles Xavier might not be a scientist or an engineer. He might not be able to invent things like Tony Stark or Shuri could do, but he does know how to teach and lead people, which is an invaluable skill not many people could do. He understands human behavior even without his special powers, and that makes Professor X one of the sneakiest entries on this list. He's also obviously an expert on mutations, which is a field that probably a lot of people just don't understand. So don't count out Professor X. And it's not like he doesn't understand technology. He and Magneto both helped construct Cerebro, an incredibly powerful and advanced machine, which definitely counts for something. Yes, Hank McCoy enhanced it, but the initial idea came from Charles. He's a different type of intelligence that I think deserves more recognition. Lunella Lafayette is definitely not in the MCU yet, but I pray to the great Kevin Feige deity every single day that they include her somehow. She's a 9-year-old girl with a red Tyrannosaurus Rex as a best friend. Yeah, you heard that right. And saying she's incredibly smart is the understatement of the century. Here's an example. In the comics, there was such a thing as the Banner Box, or the Brain Omnicompetence Examiner. It was made to test intelligence by Bruce Banner, and no one on Earth could solve it. Lunella comes along and solves it in seconds. But she doesn't come from Earth. She's also known as Moon Girl and possesses the inhuman power of switching consciousness with her dinosaur. She's done more incredible things like constructing an underground lab and building a spaceship, all with very limited resources. That would probably make Tony's time in that cave seem like a technical marvel. So again, please, Mr. Kevin Feige, please bring Moon Girl to the MCU. I need to see that big red T-Rex. In the comics, it's often acknowledged that the children of superheroes become even stronger versions of the parents. I guess a lot of heroes just have great genes. Well, that's why we need to talk about Valeria Richards. the daughter of uber smarty Reed Richards and Sue Storm. In the comics, she actually doesn't have any powers, which is rare, but what she lacks in power, she makes up for in intelligence. As Reed puts it, by the age of 3, his daughter had already surpassed him in terms of intelligence, which is crazy. Just how smart was she at that age? Well, at that young age, she figured out that she needed to hide her intelligence after she was able to calculate that her massive intelligence would cause a rift and divide in the family about 82 months in the future. Wow. Again, 3 years old. If she's that smart at that young age, it's a little scary to think what she would be like all grown up. Wouldn't it be fascinating to see someone that smart in the MCU? I think so.
This is Hank McCoy, one of our most talented young researchers.
How wonderful.
Hank McCoy and Bruce Banner would probably have a lot to talk about. Is it too much to ask for a meetup of these two characters sometime in the future? Yes, Hank is strong and quite blue, but Hank also has a PhD in biophysics and genetics. On top of that, he's the one who usually fixes Cerebro and upgrades the Danger Room. He's really the X-Men MVP. If we want to add even more skills for him, let's just mention he knows a lot about quantum mechanics, nanotechnology, theoretical physics, and obviously is multilingual, with a passion for literature and music. Does your brain hurt yet? Mine does. Stephen Strange started off in the MCU as the worst kind of smart. He was the type of intellect who knew he was the smartest person in any room, which is an incredibly annoying character trait when not done right. Fortunately, his car crash sent him on a humbling journey and eventually led him to become the Sorcerer Supreme. Now, I don't think this journey really changed his mindset, and if anything, he probably considers himself even smarter than he was. But the amount of knowledge to be a world-famous surgeon and to know how to do magic tricks really means Strange's intelligence should not be messed with. Vision's inclusion on this list is kind of a cheat, don't you think? He's basically a synthetic android. Of course he's going to be smart. He has the best parts of Jarvis and Ultron, two supercomputers, so he literally holds almost every piece of attainable knowledge known to man. Sure, all that knowledge previously made Vision a little lackluster in the social skills department, but cut him some slack, he was learning. And in WandaVision, there was really a time where there were two almost equal Visions in terms of knowledge. And hearing them talk about that whole ship of what's-its-name really showed how much each of them knew. I was definitely jealous of the knowledge there. There's book smart and then there's street smart. Rocket is definitely street smart. Sure, he's sometimes as socially oblivious as Drax and does things like wink with his wrong eye, but you can't deny how smart the trash panda actually is. Think of how many bombs and weapons Rocket's constructed over the years. You think any old Raccoon could do that? I don't think so. And besides his obvious mechanical knowledge, look at how he took out all those Ravagers in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He's also a master strategist when the situation calls for it. I'd give him credit for being a great pilot too. But Quill is also a great pilot, and I wouldn't necessarily call him smart. The apple really didn't fall that far from the tree, did it? Yes, Tony Stark was smart, but where do you think he got it from? His father was just as much of a genius, billionaire, playboy philanthropist as Tony ended up being, and he was responsible for a lot of incredible inventions and devices. In fact, you might call it even more impressive given the time period where Howard invented most of his devices. It just seems a lot harder to make weapons and gadgets and whatnot in the 40s and 50s compared to the post-2000s, don't you think? Jane Foster is going to get her chance to suit up and punch baddies with the power and strength of Thor, but we shouldn't forget just how smart Jane actually is. She's still one of the world's greatest and leading experts in astrophysics and probably knows more about the stars and space than anyone else on Earth who isn't secretly an alien. That's one thing I'm really hoping for the Thor sequel. I know she's going to be going through a lot, but it would be awesome if we can see the character as both a strong, muscular, Thor-like hero and a brilliant scientist. Is that too much to ask? The T'Challa they gave us in the MCU was wonderful and, most importantly, kingly. He was a true leader and a great warrior, and he'll definitely be missed. And while the adaptation from comic to screen was great, they did tend to leave out T'Challa's intelligence levels from the comics. Like, it's not specifically mentioned, but to become the Black Panther, you have to train in mental perfection as well as being a great warrior. Like, did you know in the comics T'Challa has a PhD in physics? And can definitely hold his own when it comes to inventing and tinkering with gadgets and new inventions. In the MCU, they left that job solely for Shuri, but T'Challa knows a thing or two himself. You may not be as familiar with the name Amadeus Cho, but you really should be. He basically has a supercomputer as a brain, and when he was a young man, he entered an intelligence contest, but the person who created it was so jealous that he ended up planting a bomb that killed Cho's parents. It's not just that Cho is smart, but he has this amazing ability to recognize patterns and run mental calculations almost instantly. He's gone up against superhumans and won based on his ability to deduce the best way to win the battle. Now that's the type of intelligence I want to see next in the MCU. It's less about knowing a ton of stuff and more about using his brain to solve problems and come to the best solution. Adam Brashear, aka Blue Marvel, is one of the strongest heroes in the galaxy, as well as being one of the smartest. He's traded blows with heroes like Thor and Sentry, and even though he's strong enough to get by on just his muscles, he decided he wanted to use his intelligence as well. He has a PhD in theoretical physics and a master's in electrical engineering, but is also one of the leading experts on antimatter. Given how antimatter is so important to the negative zone, maybe the MCU will find a way to get Brashear and Reed Richards interacting with one another. I think people overlook how smart Nebula is. She's mostly just seen as an angry and socially awkward individual who you absolutely don't want to fight, but she's pretty smart too. I mean, she's basically all cybernetics at this point, so she's probably got a computer chip or two in her brain somewhere, right? I just wanted to highlight the fact that when Tony and Nebula were trapped for weeks in space, she was right beside Tony trying to fix the ship to take them home. She definitely knew what she was doing there, so don't count out her intelligence. You know who just missed out on making the list? Peter Quill. He's the type of dumb smart to challenge a supervillain to a dance-off in order to save the galaxy. Only he would do that. That deserves some credit, right?